Hallo, freunde, und willkommen. My name is Nate, and thank you so much for clicking on this video. Now, in today's video, we're going to talk about everybody's favorite topic, and that is politics. Just kidding. It's not everybody's favorite topic, but it is important nonetheless. Now, if you didn't know, Germany just had their elections. And doing the little bit of research that I have done on the German political system, I am confused. It is deep. And coming from the United States with our wonderful two-party system, Germany's 30 plus 40 party system that they have is just mind-blowing. It's a little bit ridiculous, actually. And I don't mean ridiculous in a bad way. They have their big ones, SPD and what's the other one? CDU, the two largest parties over there. But they have numerous others that you can belong to, that you can vote into and get up into the government over there in Germany. Now, on top of that, if one party doesn't garner the necessary amount of votes for a majority or over, I don't even understand how many they need, but then they have the option of forming a coalition with other parties so that they all kind of govern together. And I believe that's the way it's been for quite a while. Not one single party has ever been so majority that they operate the government by themselves. So with all these confusing facts and all this knowledge that I really don't have any clue about, I thought I'd react to a video that talks about the German party system, and hopefully this guy can shed some light on the subject for me and possibly for you. And if you have anything to add, please leave them in the comments below. I love learning about new things, and obviously if I plan on living in Germany, I better get my act together and learn as much as I can about the political system, because it will affect me personally once I live over there. So let's just jump into the video and see how much we can learn about the German political system.
The political parties in Germany. Who are they? What do they do? And what do people think of them? Well, let's find out.
All right, let's go.
There are dozens of parties in Germany, but for national politics we can focus on just 6. 7 if you're a pedantic know-it-all. And how do we know these 6 are the important ones? Well, they're the only ones with seats in the national parliament. The other ones are either too small to get in or too regional to matter. I'm sorry, Magdeburger Gartenpartei, we're here for the big guys. Just like most democracies on this planet, German politics were once dominated by 2 major parties, one of the broad, more progressive center-left and one of the broad, more conservative center-right. But as we shall see, the whole power dynamic has changed quite a bit, especially in recent years when minor parties have become much more relevant and powerful. There will be time codes for all of these, but for now let's start with
Die Sozialdemokratische Partei Deutschlands, SPD.
This is the supposedly big party of the center-left. It's the oldest party in Germany, emerging from socialist movements of the 1860s before moderating into what it is today. If you're familiar with any of the many Labour parties around the world, like the UK one, or the New Zealand one, or the Dutch Partij van de Arbeid, you probably have a good idea of the SPD's basic profile, which is being the party of solidarity. A kind of solidarity that's expressed by a strong welfare state focusing on the working class as well as overall social and economic justice. Accordingly, their main focus has always been on the blue-collar worker, your coal miner, metal worker, cleaner, hands-on kind of jobs. But these days they're really struggling to keep that aura of the grand old workers' party alive. You might be getting different explanations for why that is, depending on if you're talking to a more left-wing social democrat or a more pragmatic moderate. Those 2 wings of the party tend to clash from time to time. But either way, just know that the SPD was the big left party for decades. On to their right-wing rival.
Die Christlich-Demokratische Union, CDU.
The CDU is a juggernaut in German politics. Most of our chancellors have been CDU, which makes them the sort of default power party, but just like the SPD, their shine's starting to wear off a little. When foreigners hear the name Christian Democratic Union, they often think that it's a sort of hardline religious group, which, let me be clear, it's definitely not. No, they're just sort of culturally Christian, right? So moderately conservative, sort of the more regressive, cautious force, in line with many of the right-wing parties across the continent. Traditionally, they're made up of social Christians, economic liberals, and conservatives. And no, I didn't just come up with these categories. No, the party quite ostentatiously advertises with these 3 pillars of the Union. But you won't be wrong just calling them the Conservative Party of Germany. As such, they're most concerned with things like public safety, tradition, frugal spending, things like that. Oh, and overall they're quite moderate, which has won them many elections, but just like with the SPD, there's a growing desire from the more ideological wing of the party to become more unapologetically conservative again. Okay, so far so easy, right? 2 parties split along the standard Western left-right divide. And the thing is, we would have almost been stuck with that 2-party system if it weren't for
Die Freie Demokratische Partei, FDP.
Yeah, this little guy has always managed to squeeze in. The word free should have already given away what the Free Democrats stand for. Freedom. Or if you want to be fancy, we could also call it liberalism. How exactly that freedom is defined may vary between the different factions of the party. You know, you've got your social liberals, economic liberals, and national liberals, which is what we call the sort of right-wing libertarian kind of liberal. But really, these differences are minuscule. The important bit is they all agree that the individual should be at the center of all policy. That makes them both very open and progressive in a kind of we shouldn't tell other people how to live stance, as well as very capitalist. So they're all about lower taxes, decreasing bureaucracy, and competition. If you are into that sort of politics, chances are that you're from a sort of upper middle class to upper class household. Maybe you're a big shot business person, or self-employed, or you founded one of these trendy hipster startups. Or at least that's the sort of person that usually votes for the FDP. Well, that and farmers. Now, I already mentioned that the FDP was sort of the reason we didn't end up with a 2-party system, and I mean that quite literally. There were a few decades when we only had 3 parties in parliament, the 2 big ones and then the FDP as the small third option. But don't think small equals unimportant. No, that was actually a really comfortable situation for the FDP to be in, because they alone could choose who would rule the country. I mean, obviously not alone, but the success of the FDP always made it so that neither of the big parties could get an outright majority. And that's how the Liberals earned the rather unflattering title of the Kingmaker, who's only there to break the tie. But these days they're really trying to get away from that image by highlighting their tech savviness, for example.
Okay, so I believe that it's the simple majority, so over 50%, and then you get to control whatever. So with all these other parties, that's why they haven't had one party get the 50+%, because these other ones like the FDP come in and they only may only get 10%, but that knocks down the total from the CDU and the FDP, meaning nobody gets a majority. So that's when the coalitions come into play.
Bündnis 90, die Grünen.
Next up are the Greens, who came in much later, like we're talking the 1980s here. The Greens are actually quite different from all of the other parties, since they grew out of these protest movements from the late 60s to late 70s, who advocated for all sorts of issues like women's rights, anti-war, anti-nuclear power, and obviously environmentalism. And they kept that revolutionary spirit going even after they upgraded to a proper party. Like, look at them! Look how uncomfortable he is. All those high-class politicians suddenly sitting next to literal hippies knitting in parliament. Now, obviously the old parties weren't happy with those green weirdos. I bet they don't even shower, they'd say. But then came a time in which the Liberals firmly placed themselves at the right hand of the Conservatives. Suddenly the Labour Party was without a partner. I think you can see where this is going. Hey, psst, hey, green guy. I didn't mean what I said about you and not showering. You actually smell quite nice. And thus came to be what's been considered kind of the natural state of German politics ever since, a red-green alliance as counterweight against a liberal-conservative one. Since then, the Greens have undergone a sometimes messy evolution, with lots of infighting between their more left fundamentalist wing, called the Fundis, and their more moderate, sometimes even conservative wing, the Realos. However, that division seems to disappear a little, since the Greens have grown so much in the recent years. Like, they've become massively popular, at least for the time being. They're still a very explicitly feminist party and fairly interventionist economically, but they try to soften the edges a bit to seem more appealing to a wider audience. It's 1989. David Hasselhoff has just torn down the wall. East and West will finally reunite. What a major historical event. You'd expect the end of the Cold War to be a pretty big political earthquake, wouldn't you? One that's surely gonna leave its mark on the German party system. But remarkably, it wasn't. The few parties that did emerge from the New East were quickly sucked up by their already existing Western counterparts, just like basically everything about the East. The only exception is Die Linke, which is the Eastern party. So you might already be aware that East Germany was a dictatorship for 40 years. It was ruled in this very repressive way by one single party, the Socialist Unity Party, or SED. But here's the thing, when the wall fell and East Germany finally got some proper democracy, that party was not outlawed. No, it got to continue in the United Germany, but now reduced from a singular, unopposed regime to just one of many contenders in the democratic process. One with minimal success. Turns out having led a dictatorship doesn't actually sound good on your resume. So in order to rebrand itself, the SED quickly changed its name to PDS, the Party of Democratic Socialism. The old Western parties were of course very much opposed to this new party, like even more so than against the Greens. But by this time the PDS had already assumed a new role, that of the niche interest party for Eastern Germans. Turns out many people from the East were nostalgic, or at least sympathetic to the SED. So even though the Eastern Bloc had collapsed, socialism was very much still on the table. A little detour. What's the difference between socialism and social democracy? In many countries the word socialism can mean a whole bunch of things, from public healthcare to abolishing property. And if the word social democracy is even used, it's usually understood to be on the same spectrum as socialism. But I think most Germans will probably cringe at that, since historically we understand those two terms to be different categories. Now I know there are a whole bunch of scientific definitions for those words, but I think conventional wisdom in Germany has it that socialism tries to overcome capitalism, whereas social democracy tries to rein in its destructive powers. Again, you might call this just a matter of degree, but here we perceive those two parties to be on different slots of the political spectrum. One of them with considerably more historical baggage. Just to finish this off, it's actually quite hard for me to see what kinds of factions there are within Die Linke. I mean, obviously there are all sorts of flavors of different doctrinaire socialist beliefs, with most of them belonging to a more settled professional class. But then you do get the occasional nutcase who's still under surveillance of the German intelligence service. So for many people it's kind of a mixed bag. Despite that, there's been a lot of talk recently about including the Linke into the center-left alliance together with the SPD and the Greens. The argument is that we're now 30 years removed from unification, and that the old guard has surely given way for a new generation of socialists to emerge who have nothing to do with the old dictatorship. You know, they just want to advocate for better wages and fighting poverty, but that's still up for debate. Die Linke is still associated with these radical economic proposals, as well as a weird pro-Russia stance. So, we'll see. Okay, last one. Controversial.
Die Alternative für Deutschland, AfD.
The AfD was founded in 2013 by a bunch of right-wing conservatives who mainly campaigned on getting rid of the euro and returning to Germany's old national currency. Boring? Yes. But no, believe it or not, that was actually quite shocking. Our political parties share a large consensus, so they're all broadly for the European Union, they're all broadly for the same economic system, and they all broadly agree that climate change is really bad. And now the AfD came in to, shake things up a bit. Back then in 2013, I thought the AfD might become the sort of mirror image of Die Linke, where they occupy the same kind of spot in our political scene, just on the opposite side. One where they criticize the moderate center from a more ideological, populist perspective. That didn't happen. Instead, what happened was that the AfD was quickly taken over by far-right extremists with overt ties to neo-Nazi organizations with just despicably racist, homophobic, revisionist beliefs. The supposedly conservative side of the party has for the most part been on board with this partnership, although some have left out of protest, including the original founder of the party, which can never be a good sign. Yeah, and you can imagine their positions. They stylize themselves as a sort of fighters against SJW culture, they're hard on immigrants, they are the only rescue for a dying Germany. And that would be the good
That sounds familiar.
Maybe the Conservatives are too mild. Maybe we did need a more staunchly right-wing party in parliament. But there's this vicious anti-democratic tendency that permeates the entire party, which is just sad. And yeah, in case you're wondering, the other parties have erected a giant wall between themselves and the AfD, deeming them basically untouchable. Will the AfD actually gain power? Like, maybe someday, but not now. Like, if the Greens or Die Linke have taught us anything, then that with more moderation, you will gain power in Germany. If you don't moderate, you're out. Dun dun dun. I'm sorry, I didn't exactly end this on a high note, did I? I still hope you had fun, and hopefully you now understand a little bit more about sort of German politics. Just thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed it. Stay civil in the comments, like obviously, don't battle to the death. It's just YouTube. And yeah, love yourself. Bye. Nein, ich habe die CSU natürlich nicht vergessen. Ja, die bekommt ihr ganz eigenes Video, wie immer. Bayern bekommt seine Extrawurst, okay? Prost.
All right. Well, I can't say that I'm understand this any clearer. A little bit. I think for me, though, I need to go over this more in depth. I need to read more articles, more videos before it actually sinks in and I can compare, sides basically. So this was very informative for me. I know there's a few other videos out there I'd like to watch and maybe react to about the political system in Germany. So I really don't have too many comments about any of this until I understand it a little bit more, because there's so much to it. I know they just had their election and it wasn't a clear-cut 50% for one party. So I know that the current chancellor, Merkel, will be at the helm possibly through the new year, and that is so they can form this coalition and appoint a new chancellor. I mean, it's pretty wild how different political systems are in different countries around the world, and each one thinking that this is the best way or that's the wrong way. I do know just one thing, and that is the AfD is a party not to be messed with. I feel like that we can't count them out completely as well. It would be foolish to just discard them as somebody that will never be in power, because we all know what happened when some people came in thinking they were the only solution to Germany's problems. And we can't go down that road again. So I hope, for the sake of Germany and for the sake of the world, that they are never allowed to regain that control. So having said all of that, I hope you enjoyed this video. I did learn some things. If you did as well, please leave a comment down below. Also, again, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell. And I think that's all I got for this one. I'm going to have to do a lot more research before I feel like I'm comfortable with the subject of the political system in Germany. But that's for another day. So thank you for watching, and until next time, we'll see you later. Bye-bye.